Imagine a pilot flying through a storm, the kind of tempest where the sky itself seems to have turned against you. The engines sputter, then fail completely, and in that terrible moment of silence, the nose of the aircraft dips downward. What follows is not merely descent, it is a spiral, a vicious rotation toward the ocean below, each second accelerating the momentum of destruction. This is not merely a metaphor for difficulty. This is the precise mechanical reality of what James Allen identified as the downward spiral of human existence. One bad day, left unchecked, compounds into a bad week. That week ferments into a month of depression. That depression calcifies into poverty, isolation, and a life spent in the wreckage of what could have been. Most men, Allen observed with sober clarity, do not pull up from this dive. They crash into the ocean of their circumstances and are never seen again. But there exists, hidden within the architecture of your consciousness, a mechanism, a master switch, that can override the very gravity of failure itself. James Allen, in his profound work The Mastery of Destiny, teaches you not merely to hope for rescue, but to become the pilot who reverses the fall and commands the ascent. Within the cockpit of the human mind, there exists a specific mechanism that the masses never discover, a lever of such fundamental power that when pulled, it halts descent instantaneously and forces the engines of life to reignite with explosive force. James Allen identified this mechanism with surgical precision and called it the evolved will, not the weak, wishful thinking that masquerades as willpower in the modern vocabulary, but a tempered, conscious force that stands as the supreme authority over all mental and physical momentum. This is the master switch, and it is not metaphorical. It is as real as the neural pathways in your brain, as tangible as the choices you will make in the next 60 seconds. But here lies the tragedy that Allen witnessed throughout his studies of human failure. Most individuals do not know where this switch is located within themselves, and even those who stumble upon it lack the strength, the knowledge, or the conviction to pull it with the decisive force required. The switch exists in a realm beyond emotion, beyond the turbulent winds of circumstance. It resides in that still point of conscious decision where you, and you alone, dictate the terms of your existence. In this revelation, in this transmission of ancient wisdom through modern understanding, we will do three things with absolute precision. First, we will locate the master switch within the geography of your consciousness. You will know exactly where it sits, how to access it, and why it has remained hidden from you until this moment. Second, we will learn what Allen called the will protocol, a systematic sequence of mental maneuvers designed to reverse any negative momentum currently governing your life, whether that momentum has manifested as financial ruin, the prison of addiction, the fog of despair, or the slow erosion of everything you once valued. Third, and most critically, we will transform the crash into a climb, not through blind optimism or the hollow encouragement that litters the landscape of self-help, but through the precise application of mental law, the same immutable principles that govern the falling of the plane and the rising of the phoenix. This is not theory to be admired. This is protocol to be executed. The choice, as it always has been, is yours. Continue the spiral into the depths or pull the switch and begin the ascent. What follows is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who are ready to become the masters of their own destiny, to seize the controls from the hands of chaos and fly the aircraft of their lives with the precision of one who has awakened to their true power. James Allen, with the clarity of a surgeon examining a diseased organ, teaches us that the downward spiral is not an act of cosmic injustice, not the cruel whim of an indifferent universe, but rather the precise operation of what he calls the law of cause and effect gaining momentum, building speed, accumulating mass until it becomes a force that seems unstoppable to those caught within its terrible rotation. Consider the mechanics with cold rationality. A negative thought, perhaps born from a moment of doubt or fear, generates a negative emotional state, which in turn produces a negative action or inaction, and this action creates a negative result in your external circumstances. But here is where the true danger lies, the point at which the spiral becomes self-sustaining. That negative result then feeds back into your consciousness, validating and reinforcing the original negative thought, creating what systems theorists would call a positive feedback loop, though there is nothing positive about it. It is a closed circuit of destruction, a perpetual motion machine of decline, and with each rotation the speed increases, the gravity intensifies, and the possibility of escape seems to recede further into impossibility. Allen observed that men caught in such spirals often speak of feeling as though they are being pulled downward by forces beyond their control, and in a sense, they are correct. But what they fail to understand is that these forces were set in motion by their own mental states, their own initial choices, their own failure to intervene at the point where intervention was still possible. The spiral operates with mathematical precision, indifferent to your suffering, blind to your potential, caring nothing for your dreams or the dreams of those who depend upon you. Each morning you wake with the residue of yesterday's failures clinging to your consciousness like smoke, and before you have even risen from your bed, the negative thought has already begun its work, coloring your perception, shaping your expectations, determining your actions. You tell yourself perhaps that today will be different, that you will break free, that you will change. But these are merely thoughts layered atop thoughts, wishes stacked upon the foundation of a mind that has not yet learned the fundamental principle Allen spent his life illuminating. The principle is this: you cannot stop the spiral through positive thinking alone. You cannot reverse momentum with affirmations. You cannot pull out of the dive by simply wishing you were flying upward instead of plummeting downward. The law of cause and effect does not respond to wishes. It responds only to causes, to actual mental and physical forces applied with precision and sustained with unwavering consistency. To stop the loop, you must do something that most men never do in their entire lives. You must sever the chain at its weakest link, which is not the external circumstance, not the negative result, but the initial negative thought itself, the first domino in the sequence of destruction. But how does one sever a chain of causation that has been forging itself link by link, perhaps for years, perhaps for decades, until it has become as thick as iron cable and seems as permanent as the laws of physics themselves? Allen answers this question with a revelation so profound, so deceptively simple, that most readers pass over it without recognizing its revolutionary implications. The chain can be broken only by the introduction of a new cause, a cause of such different character, such different frequency, such different intention that it cannot coexist with the negative momentum that preceded it. This new cause is not another thought, not another emotion, not another wish or hope or fear. It is an act of will, capital W, the evolved will, that stands outside the chain of mechanical causation, the force within you that is capable of intervening in the machinery of your own psychology and saying, with absolute authority, this pattern ends now. The will is not part of the spiral. It is the force that can step into the spiral and disrupt it, the hand that can reach into the spinning mechanism and pull the emergency brake, the consciousness that can observe the downward momentum and refuse to participate in it for even one more second. Consider what this means in practical terms, in the lived experience of a man who has been caught in the spiral of financial failure, watching his bank account dwindle, his opportunities vanish, his confidence erode with each passing day. The spiral has logic to it, a terrible internal consistency. Because he feels like a failure, he behaves like a failure, and because he behaves like a failure, he produces the results of a failure, and because he sees these results, he feels even more strongly that he is a failure. And round it goes, each cycle deepening the groove, making the pattern more automatic, more inevitable, until he begins to identify himself with the spiral, to believe that he is the spiral, that this downward trajectory is simply who he is and who he will always be. Allen's teaching cuts through this identification with the precision of a diamond cutting glass. You are not the spiral, you are the one who has the power to stop it. And that power resides in a faculty of mind that exists beyond the reach of circumstance, beyond the influence of past results, beyond the gravity of accumulated failure. This faculty is the will, and it is the only force in the universe capable of standing in the middle of a chain reaction and demanding a different outcome. The tragedy Allen witnessed, the tragedy that motivated him to write with such urgency, such moral force, is that millions of human beings live their entire lives without ever discovering this power within themselves, without ever realizing that they possess the master switch that could halt their descent at any moment. They believe themselves to be victims of circumstance, prisoners of their past, powerless before the momentum of negative patterns that have taken root in their lives. They try various remedies. They read books about positive thinking. They repeat affirmations. They visualize success. They make resolutions on New Year's Eve, and yet the spiral continues because none of these methods address the fundamental problem, which is not the content of their thoughts, but the quality of their will. A weak will cannot break a strong pattern. A wavering intention cannot sever a chain of iron. A mind that has not developed the capacity for sustained, focused, unwavering determination cannot interrupt a momentum that has been building for years. This is why Alan speaks of the evolved will. It is a faculty that must be developed, strengthened, trained through use until it becomes powerful enough to override all the mechanical forces of psychology that would otherwise determine your fate. The law of cause and effect, Alan reminds us, is not cruel, it is simply law, operating with the same impersonal precision as gravity or thermodynamics. A negative thought produces negative results, not because the universe has something against you, but because the architecture of reality is such that causes produce effects that are consistent with their nature. Plant a seed of fear, reap a harvest of paralysis. Plant a seed of resentment, reap a harvest of isolation. Plant a seed of self-pity, reap a harvest of helplessness. The spiral is simply this law in action, momentum building upon momentum, cause producing effect, producing cause in an unbroken chain. But here is the key insight, the lever that moves worlds. Because the spiral is a chain of causes and effects, it can be broken by the introduction of a cause that is radically different from everything that has come before. This is what the will provides, the power to introduce discontinuity into a continuous pattern, to inject a new cause into a system that has been running on automatic, to be the author of a new beginning in the middle of what seemed like an inevitable end. And so we arrive at the threshold of transformation, standing at the point where understanding must give way to action, where theory must yield to practice, where the knowledge of the spiral and the knowledge of the will must combine to produce actual intervention in the machinery of your declining life. Alan does not leave us with mere philosophy. He provides a protocol, a sequence of precise mental maneuvers designed to locate the master switch and pull it with the force necessary to reverse momentum that may have been building for a lifetime. But before we can execute this protocol, we must understand one more crucial aspect of the spiral. It consumes energy at an exponential rate. Every moment you spend caught in the downward rotation is a moment in which your vital force, your creative power, your capacity for focused action is being drained away, burned up in the friction of worry, anxiety, regret, and fear. The spiral is not just pulling you down, it is bleeding you dry, and the longer it continues, the less energy you will have available to pull yourself out. This is why intervention must be immediate, why the decision to pull the master switch cannot be postponed to some future moment when conditions are more favorable or you feel more ready. The spiral does not care about your readiness, it only knows momentum, and every second you delay is another rotation deeper into the vortex. What Alan offers is not hope in the conventional sense, not the shallow reassurance that everything will work out if you just keep trying. What he offers is something far more valuable, a precise map of the territory of causation, showing you exactly where you are in the spiral, exactly how the momentum was created, exactly what force is required to break it, and exactly where that force must be applied for maximum effect. He shows you that the master switch is not external to you, not dependent on changing your circumstances or waiting for better luck or hoping someone will rescue you. The master switch is within you, has always been within you, waiting for the moment when you would finally understand its nature and its location and its proper use. That moment, if you choose to make it so, is now. The spiral continues its rotation, gravity continues its pull, the ocean rushes up to meet the falling plane, but within the cockpit of your consciousness, your hand hovers over the master switch, and the next thought you think, the next decision you make, will determine whether you crash into the depths or pull up into the sky. Alan has shown you where the switch is. Whether you pull it is the only question that matters. The only question that has ever mattered. The only question upon which the entire trajectory of your destiny depends. The will, as James Allen defines it with the precision of a philosopher and the passion of a prophet, is the only force in the human experience capable of intervening in the chain of cause and effect once that chain has acquired momentum and direction. Consider the profound implications of this statement. You live in a universe governed by law, where every effect has a cause, where every result is the inevitable consequence of prior conditions, where the present is always the child of the past. This is the iron framework of reality, and most men, perceiving this framework, conclude that they are prisoners of it, helpless before the momentum of patterns established years ago, condemned to play out the consequences of decisions made when they were ignorant or weak or blinded by desire. Allen's revelation shatters this conclusion with the force of a hammer striking glass. Within this universe of law, within this machinery of cause and effect, there exists one anomaly, one element that is not merely the product of prior causes, but is itself a cause-initiating force. And that element is your will, properly understood and properly applied. The will is not a wish, not a desire, not a hope. It is the power to say no to the entire momentum of the past, to stand in the present moment with full consciousness of where you have been and where you are going, and to dictate, with absolute authority, a new direction. Most men have never experienced this power because they have never developed it, never trained it, never understood its nature or its proper use. They confuse will with stubbornness, or with the emotional intensity of a strong desire, or with the temporary surge of motivation that comes from reading an inspiring book or hearing a compelling speech. But these are not the will that Allen speaks of. These are merely the surface movements of a deep ocean, waves that rise and fall while the depths remain undisturbed. The true will, the evolved will, is something far more fundamental. It is the conscious power of choice exercised not in moments of emotional intensity, but in moments of calm clarity. The power to select one direction over another, not because you feel like it, but because you have decided that this is the direction you will go, regardless of feelings, regardless of circumstances, regardless of the momentum that would pull you elsewhere. This will operates from a center of consciousness that is beyond emotion, beyond the turbulent weather of mood and circumstance, a center that ancient philosophers called the self, and modern psychology has largely forgotten how to access. From this center, you can observe the spiral without being caught in it. You can see the patterns without being controlled by them, and most importantly, you can intervene in causation itself. The intervention looks simple from the outside, so simple that most people dismiss it as inadequate to the scale of the problem. It is the power to say no. But understand what this no represents in the architecture of causation. It is a break in the chain, a refusal to allow the next link to be forged, a conscious decision to stop participating in a pattern that has been running on automatic for however long it has been running. When you are caught in a downward spiral of financial failure, your mind generates certain thoughts automatically. I am not good with money. I always fail at this. Opportunities never come to me. I am destined to struggle. These thoughts are not random. They are the next rotation of the spiral, the momentum of the past asserting itself in the present, the pattern demanding to continue. And here, at this precise moment, the will can intervene. Not by replacing the negative thought with a positive one, not by arguing with it or analyzing it or trying to understand where it came from, but simply by refusing to energize it, refusing to allow it to proceed to the next stage where thought becomes emotion and emotion becomes action, and action becomes result. The no is a severance, a cutting of the chain at the point where you have the most leverage, which is always the present moment, always the thought that is occurring right now. But Allen goes deeper still, revealing a dimension of will that separates the merely disciplined person from the true master of destiny. The will is not only the power to refuse the negative, but the power to dictate the new direction that will replace what has been refused. It is one thing to stop the spiral. It is another thing entirely to command the ascent. This is where most attempts at self-improvement fail. They focus on stopping bad habits without establishing new ones, on eliminating negative thoughts without installing positive patterns, on saying no to the past without saying yes to a specific future. The result is a kind of vacuum, a void where the old pattern has been disrupted, but no new pattern has been established, and nature abhors a vacuum. The old momentum will rush back in to fill the space unless you have actively created something to take its place. The evolved will performs both functions simultaneously. It severs the chain of negative causation, and in the same motion establishes a new cause, a new direction, a new standard of thought and action that is non-negotiable, that brooks no compromise, that stands as the new law governing your life. This is not repression, this is replacement. This is not fighting against the old, this is building the new so firmly that the old has no room to return. Alan understood that the power of the will is directly proportional to its clarity and specificity. A vague intention has no power against a specific pattern. A general desire for improvement cannot defeat a concrete habit of self-destruction. The will becomes powerful only when it is focused like a laser, concentrated on a specific point of intervention, executed with precise timing and unwavering commitment. This is why he speaks of the will as that force unseen, not because it is mystical or supernatural, but because its operation is internal, invisible to others, manifesting only in its effects. When a man exercises true will, observers see only the result. He stops drinking, he starts saving money, he ends a toxic relationship, he begins a new discipline, but they do not see the internal moment of decision, the point at which the master switch was pulled, the instant when he stood before the momentum of his past and said, with every fiber of his being, "This ends now, and what begins now is something entirely different." That moment is sacred, in the secular sense of the word. It is the moment when a human being transcends the mechanical causation of their psychology and becomes, for one shining instant, the author of their own fate, rather than the character in a story written by their conditioning. The skeptic might ask, if the will has such power, why do so many people fail to use it? Why do addictions persist? Why do financial spirals continue? Why does the downward momentum seem so resistant to intervention? Alan's answer is twofold, and both aspects are crucial to understanding the true nature of will. First, most people have never developed this faculty. They possess it in potential, but it is weak, untrained, like a muscle that has never been exercised. They have spent their lives responding to circumstances rather than dictating to them, reacting to emotions rather than commanding them, following the path of least resistance rather than cutting a new path through the wilderness. The will is not a magical gift distributed unequally by fate. It is a developed capacity, strengthened through use, fortified through the accumulation of small victories, made powerful through consistent practice. Every time you exercise your will successfully, every time you do the thing you decided to do despite not feeling like doing it, you add a small increment to the total strength of this faculty, until eventually it becomes powerful enough to intervene in even the most severe downward spirals. Second, and perhaps more importantly, most people fail to use their will because they do not believe they possess it. They have accepted, consciously or unconsciously, the materialist narrative, that they are merely biological machines, responding mechanically to stimuli, controlled by their genetics and their conditioning and their circumstances, with no more real agency than a billiard ball bouncing across a table. This belief is itself a cause that produces effects. If you believe you have no power to choose, you will not exercise that power. And if you do not exercise it, it will remain weak, and its weakness will seem to confirm your belief that you never had it in the first place. This is the most insidious spiral of all. The spiral of disbelief in one's own agency, the momentum of learned helplessness, the accumulated weight of a lifetime spent being told, directly or indirectly, that you are a victim of forces beyond your control. Alan's teaching is a direct assault on this belief, a declaration of independence from the tyranny of mechanical causation, an assertion that at the core of your being exists a power that is not the product of past causes, but is itself the initiator of new causes, and that this power, when awakened and trained and directed with precision, can overcome any momentum, reverse any spiral, and redirect the entire trajectory of your life toward destinations that your conditioned self would have considered impossible. The will, therefore, is not merely a tool for personal improvement. It is the fundamental dividing line between those who create their destiny and those who are swept along by forces they do not understand. It is the difference between the pilot and the passenger, between the sculptor and the clay, between the author and the character. And here is the final crucial insight that Alan offers. The will does not operate in grand, dramatic gestures alone, though it certainly can do so when necessary. More often, it operates in small, quiet moments of decision, moments that seem insignificant at the time, but that accumulate over days and weeks and months into patterns of such strength that they become the new default, the new automatic, the new momentum. But this time, momentum in the direction of your choosing, rather than the direction chosen for you by your unexamined habits and unconscious patterns. The master switch is pulled not once but constantly, each time you notice the spiral beginning to form and refuse to participate in it, each time you feel the pull of the old pattern and choose the new one instead, each time you stand at the fork in the road and consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of what you are doing and why, take the path that leads upward rather than the path that leads down. This is the will in action, not a single heroic moment, but a lifetime of small victories, each one adding to the total momentum of your ascent, until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer the person who was caught in the spiral, that you have become someone entirely different, someone who was forged in the fire of conscious choice and tempered by the discipline of sustained will. Wallace Wattles, that other great architect of the mental sciences, teaches us a principle that dovetails with perfect precision into Alan's revelation about the will and the downward spiral. You cannot create wealth. You cannot build anything of lasting value. You cannot move forward into a better future if you are currently in the act of falling. This is not metaphor. This is mechanical reality. When a building is collapsing, you do not begin laying the foundation for the next floor. When a ship is sinking, you do not start planning the itinerary for your next voyage. When the plane is in a spiral toward the ocean, you do not pull out the in-flight magazine and start selecting your meal preferences. The absolute prerequisite for construction is stability, and stability is precisely what the downward spiral destroys with ruthless efficiency. In our previous exploration of Wattles's teaching, we constructed what we called the mental citadel, that fortress of consciousness designed to block the invasion of anxiety, worry, and fear, the toxic mental states that poison creativity and paralyze action. But the mental citadel, powerful as it is, performs a defensive function. It keeps the enemies of progress at bay, but it does not, by itself, reverse a fall that is already in progress. This is where Alan's master switch becomes not merely complementary to Wattles's system, but absolutely essential to it. The will protocol stops the fall, arrests the downward momentum, brings you back to stable ground, and only then, only after stability has been achieved, can the work of construction begin. Think of it in terms of energy allocation, that most precious and finite resource that governs all achievement. When you are caught in a downward spiral, whether financial, emotional, relational, or spiritual, a massive percentage of your total available energy is being consumed by the spiral itself. Your mind races with anxious thoughts about how far you have fallen and how much further you might fall. Your emotions swing wildly between panic and despair, each swing burning energy like a furnace consuming fuel. Your attention, which Wattles correctly identifies as the laser that focuses creative power, becomes scattered across 1,000 worries, never resting long enough on any single point to generate the heat necessary for transformation. Your willpower, that limited daily reserve that determines whether you can sustain disciplined action, drains away in the constant effort to cope with the psychological weight of being in decline. Alan understood this energy crisis with crystal clarity. A man who is falling cannot simultaneously focus on rising because the fall itself demands all his attention, all his effort, all his resources just to prevent complete catastrophe. The spiral is not just pulling you down, it is bleeding you of the very energy you would need to pull yourself up, creating a vicious cycle where the fall makes escape harder, and the difficulty of escape accelerates the fall. This is why the sequence matters absolutely, why you cannot skip steps in the architecture of transformation. First, you must pull the master switch and arrest the spiral. This is Alan's contribution, the will protocol that we will detail with surgical precision in the sections that follow. Only after the fall has been stopped, after the hemorrhaging of energy has been stemmed, after you have achieved what pilots call stable flight, can you then begin to apply Wattles' creative principles, holding the vision of what you want to build, moving with purpose toward that vision, maintaining the mental state of gratitude and certainty that attracts resources and opportunities. But if you try to apply Wattles' principles while still in the spiral, you will fail, not because the principles are flawed, but because you do not have a stable platform from which to apply them. It would be like trying to perform surgery while riding a roller coaster. The tools might be perfect, your knowledge might be complete, but the instability of your platform makes precision impossible. The will protocol provides that stable platform. It is the emergency brake that stops the roller coaster, the anchor that prevents further drift, the foundation stone upon which everything else can be built. Consider the practical implications for someone in financial freefall, that most common and most devastating of modern spirals. Their bank account dwindles week by week, bills pile up faster than income, creditors begin to circle, opportunities that were once available close off one by one, and the psychological pressure becomes a physical weight on their chest, making sleep difficult, focus impossible, clear thinking a distant memory. In this state, telling them to visualize abundance or think prosperously or be grateful for what they have is not just useless, it is cruel, because they do not have the energy or the stability to do these things effectively. Their mind is consumed with survival, with the immediate crisis, with the next bill and the next threat and the next humiliation. What they need first, before any creative principle can take root, is to stop the bleeding, to arrest the downward momentum, to say no with such force that the spiral breaks its grip. This is the master switch, not a way to instantly solve all their problems, but a way to stop making them worse, to create a floor beneath which they will not fall, to establish a baseline of stability from which recovery becomes possible. Only after the spiral has been arrested can they begin to redirect energy away from crisis management and toward wealth creation. Alan and Wattles, though writing independently and emphasizing different aspects of mental science, are describing two phases of the same transformation. Alan gives you the emergency protocol for when you are in decline. Wattles gives you the construction protocol for when you are ready to rise. Alan teaches you how to pull out of the dive. Wattles teaches you how to fly once you are airborne. Alan focuses on the will as the force that breaks negative patterns. Wattles focuses on the imagination as the force that creates positive ones. But both men understood a truth that unites their teachings. The universe responds to causes, and the causes you set in motion through your thoughts and actions will produce effects with mathematical precision, whether those effects build you up or tear you down. The difference between a life of increasing prosperity and a life of increasing poverty is not luck, not circumstances, not the economy or your education or your starting point. It is simply the cumulative effect of whether the causes you are setting in motion are constructive or destructive, whether your mental and physical energy is being directed toward creation or being dissipated in crisis. The master switch allows you to interrupt destructive causation. The mental citadel allows you to protect constructive causation. Together, they form an integrated system for taking control of your destiny in a world that seems designed to strip that control away from you. The conservation of energy principle applies to consciousness just as it applies to physics. You have a finite amount of mental, emotional, and physical energy available to you in any given day, and this energy can either be invested or wasted. There is no third option. When you are in a downward spiral, the vast majority of this energy is being wasted. Wasted on worry about the past, wasted on anxiety about the future, wasted on the exhausting emotional turbulence of watching yourself fail, wasted on the cognitive load of managing an increasingly complex web of problems and deficits and threats. This waste is not a side effect of the spiral. It is the mechanism by which the spiral sustains itself. Because as long as you are expending all your energy on coping with decline, You have no energy left over for creating ascent. Alan's insight cuts through this trap like a sword. By using the master switch to stop the spiral, you instantly reclaim enormous amounts of energy that were being consumed by the fall. That energy, once reclaimed, becomes available for construction, for the application of Wattles's creative principles, for the sustained focus and disciplined action that builds wealth and achievement and the life you actually want, rather than the life that happens to you by default. This is why we speak of a protocol rather than a single decision or a momentary burst of willpower. A protocol is a sequence of precise steps, executed in order, designed to address a complex problem through systematic intervention. The will protocol is your emergency procedure, your sequence of mental and physical maneuvers designed to arrest a spiral before it carries you past the point of recovery. Just as pilots train endlessly on emergency procedures so that when the engines fail they do not freeze or panic, but automatically execute the correct sequence, you must internalize the will protocol so that when you feel the nose of your life beginning to dip, when you sense the first rotation of a new spiral beginning to form, you do not waste time in denial or despair, but immediately execute the sequence that arrests the fall. This is the bridge from Wattles to Allen, from defense to offense, from stopping bad things from happening to making good things happen. First you stabilize, then you build. First you stop the energy bleed, then you direct that energy toward creation. First, you pull out of the dive. Then you set your course for the destination of your choosing. The master switch is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning, the essential first step, without which no other step is possible, the foundation upon which everything else rests. There is a phenomenon in physics called the principle of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. This principle, Alan realized, applies with equal force to the energy of consciousness, to that vital force that animates your thoughts, powers your actions, and determines whether you spend your days building or merely surviving. When you are caught in a downward spiral, you are not simply experiencing bad luck or temporary setbacks. You are caught in a system that is actively consuming your vital energy at a rate faster than you can replenish it, creating what engineers would call a deficit condition, a state in which output exceeds input, and the inevitable result is system failure. The spiral feeds on your energy like a parasite feeds on its host. Your worry about money drains energy that could be invested in earning money. Your anxiety about relationships consumes attention that could be building relationships. Your fear of failure burns fuel that could be powering action toward success. Alan saw this with painful clarity in the lives of the men and women he counseled. They were not failing because they lacked potential or intelligence or opportunity, but because the downward spirals they were caught in had created such massive energy deficits that they had nothing left to invest in their own rescue. Consider the mathematics of the energy bleed with ruthless honesty, because only by understanding the scale of the problem can you appreciate the urgency of the solution. A typical human being has perhaps 4 to 6 hours per day of peak mental energy, the kind of focused, creative, decision-making power that is required for meaningful progress on difficult problems. This is not clock time, but energy time, the actual capacity for sustained high-quality thinking and action. Everything else is maintenance energy, the lower-grade fuel that keeps you functioning but doesn't drive transformation. Now, when you are in a downward spiral, how much of that premium energy is being consumed by the spiral itself? If you are in financial trouble, you might spend 2 hours worrying about bills, another hour arguing with your partner about money, another hour scrolling through job postings feeling discouraged, another 30 minutes avoiding looking at your bank account. That is 4.5 hours of premium energy burned on crisis management with zero constructive output. The deficit is devastating. You started the day with perhaps 5 hours of transformation-grade energy, spent 4.5 managing the psychological fallout of your decline, and have 30 minutes left over to actually do something that might reverse the decline. Is it any wonder that the spiral continues? Is it any wonder that rescue seems impossible? You're trying to climb out of a hole with less than 10% of your available strength, while the other 90% is being consumed by the experience of being in the hole. The master switch, when pulled with precision and sustained with discipline, performs a function that is nothing short of miraculous in its practical effects. It stops the energy bleed instantly, reclaiming those hours of premium mental fuel that were being incinerated in the furnace of the spiral, and redirecting them toward construction rather than crisis management. But here is where most people misunderstand what Alan is teaching, where they mistake the master switch for a magic wand that will instantly solve all their problems. The switch does not solve your problems, it stops you from making them worse. It does not deposit money in your bank account. It stops you from spending energy worrying about your bank account in a way that prevents you from earning more. It does not repair your relationship. It stops you from consuming emotional energy in patterns of conflict and resentment that make repair impossible. The genius of the master switch is not that it creates energy. Energy cannot be created, remember, but that it dramatically reduces energy waste. And in any system where energy is scarce and precious, the elimination of waste is equivalent to the creation of abundance. Stop bleeding energy, and suddenly you have energy available for investment. Stop the spiral, and suddenly you have the stability necessary to build. This is where Alan's teaching intersects with the most advanced understanding of human performance. The recognition that discipline and willpower are not personality traits, but energy resources depletable and renewable, following laws as precise as the laws governing physical energy. When your energy is being consumed by a downward spiral, your capacity for disciplined action collapses because discipline requires energy, and you have none to spare. This is why people in financial crisis often make terrible financial decisions, why people in emotional turmoil often sabotage their relationships, why people in career decline often fail to do the very things that would reverse their decline. Not because they are stupid or weak or self-destructive by nature, but because the spiral has created such an energy deficit that they cannot muster the fuel required for better choices. The downward momentum takes on a life of its own, a self-sustaining quality, where each bad decision leads to conditions that make the next bad decision more likely, and the whole system spirals downward with increasing velocity until it hits bottom, or the person finally manages to pull the master switch and break the cycle. But what does it actually mean in practical neurological terms to stop the energy bleed? Alan, writing before modern neuroscience, nevertheless intuited the fundamental mechanism. The spiral persists because your mind has created what we would now call neural pathways, automatic patterns of thought and emotion that fire without your conscious involvement, consuming energy in well-worn grooves of worry, anxiety, and rumination. These patterns are not you. They are programs running in your wetware, installed through repetition, maintained through lack of awareness, and capable of consuming massive amounts of cognitive resources while producing zero constructive output. When you pull the master switch, when you engage the evolved will with clarity and force, you are not trying to delete these patterns, which is impossible in the short term, but rather to starve them of the energy they need to continue firing. The technique is elegant in its simplicity. You notice the pattern beginning to run, the worry thought, the anxiety loop, the rumination on past failure, and you refuse to engage with it, refuse to follow it down the familiar path, refuse to give it the attention and emotional energy it needs to complete its cycle. This refusal is not repression, it is redirection. You are not pushing the thought away. You are simply declining to fuel it, like declining to put gasoline in a car you no longer wish to drive. The energy you save through this redirection is immediately available for other uses, and this is where the transformation accelerates beyond what most people believe possible. Imagine reclaiming even 2 of those 4.5 hours of premium energy we calculated earlier. 2 hours per day that were previously consumed by worry and rumination, now available for focused action toward improvement. That is 10 hours per week, 40 hours per month, nearly 500 hours per year of high-quality mental energy redirected from waste to investment. What could you accomplish with an additional 500 hours of focused energy per year? You could learn a new skill, build a side business, repair a deteriorating relationship, transform your health, reconstruct your finances. The possibilities are not unlimited, but they are vast, and they are all gated by the same fundamental requirement. You must first stop the energy bleed. You must pull the master switch that arrests the spiral and reclaims the fuel that the spiral was consuming. This is not theory. This is engineering. This is the precise application of the principle of conservation of energy to the domain of consciousness, the domain where your destiny is forged or squandered based on whether you master the fundamental skills of energy management or remain ignorant of them. Alan's final insight on this point is perhaps his most profound. The energy you reclaim from the spiral is not merely quantitatively more, but qualitatively different. Energy consumed by worry is heavy, dark, exhausting. It makes you tired rather than enlivened, depleted rather than motivated. But energy redirected to construction, to the building of something new, to progress toward a goal you actually care about, is light, bright, self-renewing. It generates more energy than it consumes, creating what positive psychologists would later call a flow state, but which Alan simply recognized as the natural condition of a human being operating in alignment with purpose rather than in reaction to crisis. When you stop the spiral, you do not merely stop losing. You create the conditions under which winning becomes possible, where energy invested returns energy as profit, where small victories compound into larger ones, where the momentum that was once pulling you down begins gradually but inexorably to carry you upward. The master switch is the mechanism that makes this reversal possible, and the will protocol, which we now explore in detail, is the systematic sequence of steps that allows you to pull the switch with the precision and force required to break even the most entrenched downward spirals and redirect your life toward the ascent that is your birthright and your responsibility to claim. The first step in the will protocol is both the simplest and the most difficult thing you will ever do. You must achieve what Alan calls radical acceptance, the unflinching acknowledgement of exactly where you are, stripped of all denial, all self-deception, all the comfortable lies you have been telling yourself to make the descent more bearable. This is not the acceptance of New Age spirituality, not the passive resignation that masquerades as serenity, not the fatalistic shrug that says, "It is what it is," while doing nothing to change it. Radical acceptance is the pilot's act of looking at the altimeter when the plane is in a dive, seeing the exact number, not the number you wish it were, not the number it might have been if you had made different choices, but the actual number that is displaying right now, and using that truth as the foundation for your next action. Without this acceptance, without this clear-eyed confrontation with reality as it actually exists, rather than as you wish it existed, every subsequent action will be built on fantasy, and fantasy cannot support the weight of transformation. You must see the truth before you can change it, and seeing the truth requires the courage to look at it without flinching, without softening it, without wrapping it in the gauze of excuses and explanations that make it easier to bear but impossible to address. Consider why this first step defeats most people before they even begin the real work of transformation. Human beings have a powerful psychological immune system designed to protect them from painful truths, a system that generates rationalizations, denials, and blame shifting with impressive speed and creativity. When you are in financial ruin, this system whispers, "It is not that bad. Everyone struggles with money. The economy is terrible right now. My boss doesn't pay me what I am worth. I just had bad luck with that investment." When you are in the grip of addiction, it says, "I can stop anytime I want. I am not as bad as those other people. I am just using it to cope with stress. Once things get better, I won't need it anymore." When you are in a failing relationship, it insists, "They are the problem, not me. If they would just change, everything would be fine. I have tried everything." This is just how relationships are after a few years. These defenses feel protective, but they are actually prison bars, because as long as you are blaming external factors or minimizing the severity of your situation or waiting for someone else to change, you cannot pull the master switch. The switch only works when you accept that you are the pilot, you are in control, and the current trajectory is the result of your prior decisions and your current state of consciousness. Alan understood that denial accelerates the crash because it prevents the intervention that could stop it. If you are in a plane that is spiraling toward the ocean, but you refuse to look at the altimeter because seeing the numbers would be too frightening, you lose the precious seconds during which recovery is still possible. Every moment spent in denial is a moment in which the momentum increases, the options decrease, and the energy required for recovery rises. This is why radical acceptance must come first, before any technique, before any protocol, before any attempt at change. Because without accurate information about your starting point, you cannot plot an effective course to any destination. The truth is, the ground beneath your feet, and you cannot build on ground you refuse to acknowledge exists. So the first maneuver in the will protocol is brutal in its simplicity. You look at your bank account and you see the exact number, not rounding up, not thinking about what it will be next week, but the number that exists right now. You look at your relationships and you assess honestly whether they are growing or dying, not based on potential, but based on actual current dynamics. You look at your health, your career, your daily habits, your mental state. You look at all of it without the protective filter of self-justification, and you say the words out loud: I am broke, I am addicted, I am lost, I am failing. The words are not an identity. They are a GPS coordinate, a starting point from which navigation becomes possible. Why must the statement be so stark, so uncompromising, so devoid of softening qualifiers? Because the will responds to clarity, not to ambiguity. A vague acknowledgement like, I am having some financial challenges right now, does not engage the will at the level of intensity required to break a downward spiral. It is too soft, too gentle, too easy to accommodate within your existing self-image without requiring any fundamental change. But when you say I am broke, when you use the word that cuts through all the euphemisms and hits the reality with full force, something shifts in your consciousness. The denial system stops generating excuses because the truth has been stated so clearly that excuses become absurd. Your attention sharpens because the danger has been named. Your will mobilizes because there is no longer any ambiguity about whether intervention is necessary. This is the paradox Alan discovered. Acceptance of the painful truth is not demoralizing, but energizing, because it ends the exhausting work of maintaining the lies and channels that energy into the work of creating change. Denial is exhausting, truth is clarifying. Lies require constant maintenance. Reality simply is, and once you have accepted it, you can stop fighting it and start changing it. The radical acceptance phase has a specific duration in the will protocol. It is a single moment of complete honesty, not an ongoing state. You are not accepting your circumstances as permanent or as defining your identity. You are simply acknowledging them as the current reality from which you will now depart. A pilot who looks at the altimeter and sees that he is at 1,000 feet and descending does not spend hours contemplating how terrible it is to be at 1,000 feet. He sees the number, processes the information, and immediately moves to the next step in the emergency procedure. Your radical acceptance should be exactly the same: a clear, honest, unflinching look at where you are, followed immediately by the shift from observation to action. The danger in this phase is that some people, particularly those who have been marinating in self-help philosophies that emphasize acceptance as an end in itself, will mistake this step for the entire protocol, will think that merely acknowledging their situation is somehow transformative in itself. It is not. Acceptance without subsequent action is just resignation with better vocabulary. Alan's radical acceptance is the foundation, not the building. It gives you the solid ground of truth upon which the will can now construct something new. There is a physiological dimension to this first step that Alan intuited, and that modern neuroscience has now confirmed. When you finally stop lying to yourself, when you let the defenses drop and look at reality without filters, your nervous system experiences a phenomenon called congruence, the alignment of your conscious understanding with the deeper knowledge that your subconscious has been holding all along. Your subconscious has known the truth the entire time. It is only your conscious mind that has been maintaining the denial, and this split between what you know and what you acknowledge, knowing creates enormous psychological tension, like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It requires constant effort and vigilance. The moment you release the denial, the moment you allow the truth to surface fully into consciousness, that tension releases, and with it releases a flood of energy that was being consumed in the maintenance of the lie. This energy, suddenly freed, becomes immediately available for the next steps in the protocol, providing the fuel for the silent command that follows. Radical acceptance is therefore not just about seeing truth. It is about liberating energy, about reclaiming the power that was being wasted in self-deception and redirecting it towards self-transformation. Alan's instruction is therefore precise and unambiguous. Before you attempt any other step in the will protocol, before you try to change your thoughts or your habits or your circumstances, you must first tell yourself the truth about where you are. Not the truth you wish were true, not the truth that would make you feel better, not the truth that preserves your ego and your excuses, but the hard, cold, exact truth that is visible when you strip away every protective layer and look at reality with ruthless clarity. This is the ground of transformation. This is the traction that allows the will to grip and turn. This is the altimeter reading that allows the pilot to know exactly how much time he has and exactly what maneuvers are required. Without this first step, everything that follows is built on sand, on fantasy, on the same self-deception that created the spiral in the first place. But with this step, with the courage to look at the truth and name it without flinching, you acquire something that most people never possess: a clear starting point, an honest assessment, a solid foundation upon which the architecture of a new life can now be constructed. The numbers are on the altimeter. The ocean is rising to meet you. You have looked at both with eyes that see clearly. Now and only now can you pull the master switch and begin the ascent. The second step in the will protocol emerges directly from the foundation of radical acceptance, but it represents a quantum leap from observation to command, from seeing to deciding, from acknowledgement of where you are to the declaration of where you will no longer go. Alan calls this the silent command, and the name itself reveals something crucial about its nature. This is not a spoken affirmation, not a statement made to others, not even a thought articulated in the normal stream of consciousness. The silent command is a directive issued from the deepest center of your being, from that point of consciousness that exists beneath emotion, beneath circumstance, beneath all the turbulent weather of your psychological life. It is the voice of the will itself, speaking with absolute authority to the entirety of your mental and physical apparatus. This command is silent because it operates at a level beneath words, but it is not weak. It is the most forceful act you are capable of, the mental equivalent of a fist slamming down on a table, the moment when you draw a line in the reality of your own consciousness and declare that this line will not be crossed again, that what has been happening is over, that a new law is now in effect. The form of the silent command is not arbitrary. It must be structured with precision to engage the will at maximum intensity. The command has three essential components, and all three must be present for it to function as Alan intended. First, it must be stated in the present tense, not as a hope for the future, but as a decision that takes effect immediately. Not, "I will stop complaining tomorrow," but "I do not complain." Not, "I'm going to be better with money," but "I do not spend money foolishly." The present tense creates what psychologists call implementation intention, the wiring of a decision directly into your behavioral system rather than leaving it floating in the abstract future where it has no power. Second, the command must be absolute, containing no qualifiers, no exceptions, no room for negotiation. Not, "I will try not to complain," but "I do not complain." The word "try" is a cancer in the language of transformation because it gives you permission to fail. The silent command permits no failure because it is not an experiment, but a law. Third, the command must be specific enough to be actionable, but broad enough to encompass the core issue. "I do not waste my energy on thoughts of lack" is better than "I will think more positively," because it identifies the specific mental habit you are severing while maintaining enough breadth to cover all its manifestations. But understanding the structure of the command is not the same as understanding how to issue it, with the force required to break a pattern that may have been running for years or decades. Most people, when they first attempt this step, make the fatal error of confusing the silent command with the positive affirmations they have encountered in popular self-help materials. They repeat the words to themselves while hoping they will somehow become true through repetition. This is not what Alan teaches. This is not the silent command. The command is not spoken to convince yourself. It is declared to establish a new law of your being, and the difference between these two intentions is everything. When you issue the silent command, you are not trying to change your mind. You are announcing to your entire system that a decision has been made at the executive level of consciousness, that this decision is non-negotiable, and that all subsidiary systems must now align with this decision regardless of their preferences or their history. You are not asking your mind to agree with the command, you are informing it that the command is now in effect, whether it agrees or not. This is the exercise of will in its purest form, the imposition of conscious choice upon mechanical patterns, the subordination of what has been to what will be. Alan understood that the silent command must be delivered from a specific state of consciousness, a state he describes as cold clarity, not emotional intensity, not hope, not desperation, but the calm, absolute certainty of one who has seen the truth, accepted it, and now dictates the terms going forward. This is why the command follows radical acceptance rather than preceding it. You cannot issue a command from a foundation of denial or confusion or emotional turmoil. The command requires you to be grounded in reality, clear about your starting point, and then from that grounded position, to project your will into the immediate future with the force of absolute conviction. The state feels, when you access it correctly, like the moment just before you jump from a high dive. There is no more debate, no more consideration of options, no more weighing of pros and cons. There is only the decision already made, and the immediate moment when that decision becomes action. The silent command is issued from this point of no return. This moment, when deliberation ends and execution begins, and it carries with it the full weight of your conscious authority over your own mental processes. The practical application requires a specific technique that Alan describes with rare directness. When you have completed radical acceptance, when you have looked at the truth of your situation with complete honesty, you take a single moment, it need not be long, perhaps 10 seconds, and you consciously gather your attention into a single point of focus. This is a physical sensation as much as a mental one. You might imagine it as pulling scattered energy back into your center, like light converging into a laser. From this concentrated state, you then issue the command, not as words, but as intention, as the pure projection of will. This ends now. Follow this with the specific standard you are establishing. I do not waste money. I do not entertain thoughts of failure. I do not participate in conflict, whatever the core negative pattern is that you are severing. The command must be felt in your body as much as thought in your mind. There should be a physical sensation of something locking into place, of a switch being flipped, of a door being closed. If you do not feel this physical component, if the command remains purely mental, you have not engaged the will at sufficient depth. You are still operating at the level of thought rather than the level of decision, and thought alone cannot break the momentum of a downward spiral. What happens after the silent command is issued is crucial to understanding how the will protocol actually works in practice. The command does not make temptation disappear. It does not remove the old patterns from your neurology. It does not change external circumstances. What it does is establish a new relationship between you and those patterns. They may still arise, but they no longer have authority. A thought of complaint may still appear in your consciousness, but the silent command has declared that you do not act on such thoughts, do not entertain them, do not give them energy. The thought becomes like a suggestion from someone whose opinion you have decided to disregard. It can be noted and dismissed in the same instant, without the elaborate internal debate that used to consume hours of your mental energy. This is the leverage point Alan has identified. You cannot control what thoughts arise, but you can absolutely control whether you energize them, and the silent command is the mechanism that makes this control automatic, rather than requiring constant conscious effort. It sets a new default, establishes a new baseline, creates a new operating system for your consciousness that functions even when your attention is elsewhere. The silent command must be renewed, but not constantly. This is a key distinction that prevents the technique from becoming another exhausting form of self-monitoring. You issue the command once with full force, at the moment when you complete radical acceptance. This initial command establishes the law. Then you renew it only when you notice yourself beginning to violate it, when you catch yourself about to waste money, about to indulge a complaint, about to follow a thought pattern you have declared off limits. In that moment, you do not berate yourself, do not engage in guilt or self-criticism, do not treat the near violation as evidence that the command is failing. You simply reissue the command, briefly and firmly. I do not do this. And you redirect your attention to what you have decided to do instead. Over time, as the command is consistently enforced through these moments of renewal, the old patterns weaken through lack of energy, and the new patterns strengthen through repeated use, until eventually the command becomes unnecessary, because it has been fully integrated into your automatic functioning. This is the goal, not to maintain eternal vigilance against your own impulses, but to install a new set of defaults that operate automatically, freeing your conscious attention for higher purposes than the constant management of self-destructive urges. Allen's final instruction regarding the silent command addresses the most common failure point. The command loses its power if you issue it and then immediately begin debating with yourself about whether you can actually follow through on it. The moment after the command is issued is sacred. It is the moment when the new law must be allowed to take root without interference from the doubting, analyzing, excuse-generating functions of your mind. This is why the command must be delivered with absolute finality, with the understanding that it is not the beginning of a negotiation, but the end of one. You have already examined your situation through radical acceptance. You have already understood the necessity of change. You have already made the decision. The silent command is not the moment of deciding, it is the moment of declaring what has already been decided. And there can be no room for second guessing or for the reopening of options that have been closed. The lock has been set, the course has been changed, the master switch has been pulled, and now, with the foundation of acceptance and the structure of the command in place, you are ready for the third step. The translation of this internal transformation into external action through what Allen calls the microaction, the smallest possible physical expression of the new law you have established, the first visible proof that the spiral has been broken and the climb has begun. The third step in the will protocol is where the internal transformation of radical acceptance and the silent command must translate into external reality, into actual observable change in your behavior and your circumstances. Allen calls this step the microaction, and the term itself contains a teaching that most people miss in their rush to create dramatic transformation. You do not reverse a downward spiral through grand gestures or heroic efforts. You reverse it through the smallest possible action that embodies the new law you have established, through your silent command. This is counterintuitive to the point of being maddening for most people who discover Allen's work, because they come to it in a state of crisis, in the middle of a spiral that has been building momentum for months or years, and their impulse is to take massive action, to make sweeping changes, to somehow compensate for all the lost time and accumulated damage through sheer force of effort. Allen stops this impulse cold with a single question. How do you expect to fly to the moon when you cannot even make your bed? The microaction is not about the magnitude of the change. It is about establishing proof of concept, about demonstrating to yourself and to the universe that the silent command was not merely words, but is actually being translated into new causation, new patterns, new momentum, this time in the direction of ascent rather than descent. The genius of the microaction lies in its relationship to what modern psychology calls self-efficacy, the belief in your own capacity to execute actions that will produce desired outcomes. When you are in a downward spiral, your self-efficacy has been systematically destroyed by repeated failures, by watching yourself fail to follow through on intentions, by the accumulating evidence that you cannot change, that you are trapped in patterns you are powerless to break. Each failed attempt at transformation, every broken New Year's resolution, every relapse, every return to the old behaviors after a brief period of improvement adds to this evidence and deepens the conviction that you are simply not capable of sustained change. The spiral feeds on this loss of self-efficacy like fire feeds on oxygen, because as long as you do not believe you can change, you will not sustain the effort required to produce real change, and your failure to sustain the effort will seem to confirm that you were right not to believe in yourself. The microaction breaks this cycle through what Alan describes as the conquest that proves competence, a victory so small that it is almost guaranteed, but meaningful enough that it begins to rebuild the shattered belief in your own agency. The selection of the microaction must be guided by 3 criteria, all of which are essential to its proper function in the protocol. First, it must be small enough that you can execute it immediately without preparation, without waiting for better circumstances, without needing resources or permissions or conditions that do not currently exist. This is why Alan's examples are so humble. Make your bed, wash the dishes, send 1 email, do 10 push-ups. These are not great achievements. They are simply actions that establish that you are capable of doing what you said you would do, that the silent command has teeth, that you are no longer a person who makes declarations and then fails to follow through. Second, the microaction must be specific and observable, with a clear binary outcome. You either did it or you did not, with no room for self-deception about partial completion or good intentions. Be more organized is not a microaction because you cannot definitively say whether you did it. Clear my desk completely is a microaction because the desk is either clear or it is not. Third, and most crucially, the microaction must be directly aligned with the silent command you issued. It must be the smallest concrete expression of the new law you have established. If your silent command was, "I do not waste money," your microaction might be to track every dollar you spend today in a notebook. If your command was, "I do not entertain thoughts of failure," your microaction might be to write down 1 specific evidence of past success. If your command was, "I do not participate in conflict," your microaction might be to respond to 1 potentially inflammatory message with calm and clarity instead of reacting emotionally. The action itself is almost absurdly small, but this is precisely the point. The spiral has convinced you that change is impossibly difficult, that transformation requires Herculean efforts you are incapable of sustaining. The microaction proves this belief wrong by demonstrating that change begins not with impossible leaps, but with possible steps, and the completion of that first step begins to dissolve the paralysis that has kept you trapped in the spiral. Alan understood what modern behavioral science has since confirmed. The hardest part of any change is not sustaining it over time, but simply beginning it, breaking through the inertia of the old pattern and establishing a new pattern through a single successful execution. The psychological impact of completing the microaction is disproportionate to its objective difficulty precisely because it operates at the level of identity rather than merely behavior. When you make your bed after issuing the silent command that you are no longer a person who lives in chaos, you are not just tidying your room, you are becoming evidence to yourself that you are capable of keeping your word, that decisions you make have power, that the downward momentum can be stopped. The bed is irrelevant. What matters is that you said you would do something and then you did it, which means that the chasm between intention and action, the gap that has defined your spiral, has been closed for this 1 moment. And if it can be closed for 1 moment, it can be closed for another and another, until the closing of that gap becomes your new default rather than the exception. This is how the spiral is reversed, not through 1 massive intervention, but through the accumulation of tiny victories that compound into new momentum, new patterns, new automated behaviors that run in the opposite direction from the ones that were destroying you. Alan's warning about this step is characteristically direct. Do not allow yourself to dismiss the microaction as too small to matter, too simple to be worth your effort, too far beneath the magnitude of your problems to constitute a real solution. This dismissal is the voice of the spiral itself, the voice of the old pattern trying to preserve itself by convincing you that if an action is not dramatic and difficult, it cannot be effective. The truth is the opposite. The microaction is effective precisely because it is not dramatic and difficult, because it does not require the massive expenditure of willpower that you do not currently possess, because it can be completed even in your current depleted state. The spiral has been consuming your energy and eroding your self-efficacy. The microaction is designed to function in exactly this condition, to be the action that is possible when nothing else is, to be the first crack in the dam of inertia that has been holding back the flood of your potential. Complete the microaction, not because it will solve your problems, it will not, but because it will prove that you can solve problems, that you are no longer paralyzed, that the silent command has translated from the realm of intention into the realm of action, and that the first rotation of new momentum has begun. The repetition of microactions follows a specific pattern that Alan describes as the staircase principle. You do not repeat the same microaction indefinitely, nor do you immediately leap to massive actions once you have completed the first one. Instead, you complete the microaction for one day, and the next day you select a microaction that is slightly more challenging, slightly more aligned with the larger transformation you are building toward, slightly more demanding of the will and the discipline that you are strengthening through this process. Perhaps on day 1 you make your bed, on day 2 you make your bed and clear your desk, on day 3 you add one more small task. The increment is tiny, almost imperceptible, but the compounding effect over time is exponential because each successful completion strengthens your self-efficacy, adds to your momentum, and makes the next slightly larger action feel achievable rather than overwhelming. This is how mountains are climbed, not in a single heroic leap to the summit, but in a sequence of individual steps, each one carrying you marginally higher, the accumulation of which eventually delivers you to heights that would have seemed impossible from the starting point. The microaction serves one final crucial function in the will protocol. It forces you to interact with physical reality rather than remaining lost in the mental realm of planning, analyzing, and theorizing about change. The spiral exists primarily as a mental and emotional phenomenon. It is a pattern of thought and feeling that then produces behaviors and results. The microaction breaks the spell of this mental prison by engaging your body, by requiring you to move, to act, to manipulate physical objects in the physical world. When you make your bed, you are not just tidying. You are asserting through action that you have power over your environment, that chaos can be converted to order, that decay can be reversed. This physical interaction with reality grounds the transformation in something tangible, something you can see and touch, something that exists independently of your mental state. The dishes are clean, or they are not. The email is sent, or it is not. The desk is clear, or it is not. This objective reality becomes a mirror in which you can see your own power reflected back to you. And with each completed microaction, the reflection grows stronger, the evidence of your capacity accumulates, and the lie that you are powerless begins to dissolve in the face of mounting proof that you are nothing of the sort. You are the pilot, your hand is on the master switch, and the first degree of ascent has begun. The fourth and final step of the will protocol addresses the most critical challenge in any transformation: the maintenance of the new direction once the initial momentum of change has carried you out of immediate crisis, but before the new patterns have become automatic. Alan calls this step maintaining altitude, and the aviation metaphor is precise. When a pilot pulls a plane out of a dive, the immediate danger passes the moment the descent stops and the nose levels out, but this is not the end of the emergency procedure. The plane must now maintain stable flight, while the pilot assesses damage, stabilizes systems, and plots a course to safe landing. If the pilot relaxes his vigilance the moment the dive is arrested, if he assumes that because the immediate crisis has passed, the danger is over, the plane can easily slip back into descent, and this time with less energy and altitude available for recovery. Your downward spiral operates by exactly the same physics. The pull of gravity, the drag of old patterns, the weight of accumulated damage does not disappear the moment you execute the silent command and complete your first microaction. The momentum of your past is still exerting force, still trying to drag you back into the familiar groove of decline. And if you relax your vigilance prematurely, if you assume that a few days or weeks of new behavior has erased years or decades of old patterns, you will find yourself back in the spiral faster than you believed possible. Alan's teaching on this point is uncompromising in a way that many readers find uncomfortable. The will protocol is not a one-time intervention, but a lifestyle, not a temporary fix, but a permanent practice, not a technique you use until things get better and then abandon, but a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own consciousness and behavior. The vigilance required is not the exhausting hyper-awareness of someone constantly afraid of making mistakes, but rather the calm, steady attention of someone who understands that thoughts are not commands, that feelings are not facts, and that the old patterns will attempt to reassert themselves the moment you stop actively maintaining the new ones. This is not pessimism. This is realism, based on the fundamental laws of psychology and habit formation. Neural pathways that have been carved deeply through years of repetition do not disappear because you have issued a silent command. They remain in your neurology, dormant but not dead, waiting for any lapse in attention to activate again and begin pulling you back toward the behaviors they encode. The specific technique for maintaining altitude is what Alan calls thought vigilance. But this term requires clarification because it is easily misunderstood as a form of thought suppression or a paranoid monitoring of your mental content. Thought vigilance is neither of these things. It is instead the development of a witnessing consciousness, a part of your awareness that stands slightly outside the stream of thoughts and feelings, observing them without being swept away by them. This witness notices when a drifting thought appears. Alan's term for any thought that would pull you back toward the old patterns, that would justify abandoning the silent command, that would rationalize just this once making an exception to the new law you have established. The drifting thought might sound like, "I have been good all week, I deserve a break," or "This situation is different, the rule does not apply here," or "I am feeling better now, I do not need to be so strict with myself anymore." These thoughts are not random. They are the old pattern attempting to re-establish control, using the language of reasonableness and flexibility to erode the absolute commitment that is the only thing keeping you from sliding back into the spiral. When the witness catches a drifting thought, the response is immediate and non-negotiable. You flip the master switch again. This is not a full repetition of the entire protocol. You do not need to go back through radical acceptance and the silent command every time a wayward thought appears. Instead, you execute what might be called the micro-renewal of the command, a brief internal reassertion of the law you have established. I do not entertain this thought. I do not follow where it leads. I do not make exceptions. This takes perhaps 3 seconds, requires no elaborate procedure, but it must be done with the same cold clarity and absolute finality that characterized the original silent command. The thought is noted, dismissed, and your attention is redirected to what you have decided to focus on instead. This micro-renewal must be executed every single time a drifting thought appears, without exception, without negotiation, without allowing yourself to believe that just this once won't matter. Just this once is how the spiral begins again. Just this once is the crack in the dam. Just this once is the first rotation of downward momentum that, if not caught immediately, will build speed until you find yourself back at the bottom, wondering how you got there. Alan understood that the need for vigilance is not permanent in the sense of lasting forever at the same level of intensity, but it is permanent in the sense that some level of attention to your thought patterns must be maintained for as long as you wish to maintain your transformation. The good news, which he emphasizes to prevent discouragement, is that vigilance becomes progressively easier over time, requiring less energy and less conscious effort as the new patterns become more deeply ingrained and the old patterns weaken through lack of use. In the first days and weeks after pulling the master switch, you may need to execute micro-renewals dozens of times per day, catching yourself constantly on the verge of slipping back into old thoughts and behaviors. This is exhausting but necessary, and it is why the microaction strategy is so important. You are conserving energy by keeping your goals small while simultaneously building the strength to maintain larger commitments. After a month or two, the frequency of drifting thoughts decreases noticeably because you have begun to establish new neural pathways, new defaults, new automated responses. After 3 to 6 months, the new patterns begin to feel natural rather than forced, and vigilance shifts from constant monitoring to periodic check-ins, moments when you consciously assess whether you are still adhering to the laws you have established or whether subtle drift has begun to occur. The metaphor of maintaining altitude extends beyond mere continuation of the new behaviors. It also encompasses the concept of what pilots call course correction. A plane flying from Los Angeles to New York does not fly in a perfectly straight line. It constantly makes tiny corrections for wind, weather, and other factors, adjustments so small and so frequent that passengers never notice them, but which are essential to arriving at the intended destination. Your transformation works the same way. You will drift slightly off course, not through major failures, but through the accumulation of small compromises, small exceptions, small moments when you did not quite execute the microaction with full commitment, or when you allowed a drifting thought to linger a moment too long before dismissing it. Maintaining altitude requires you to notice this drift early, when correction is still easy, rather than waiting until you have drifted so far off course that getting back requires major effort. This is why Alan recommends a daily practice, preferably at the same time each day, of conscious assessment. Am I still living by the silent command I established? Have I completed my microactions today? Have I caught and dismissed the drifting thoughts, or have I been allowing them to run unchecked? This daily check-in takes perhaps 2 minutes, but serves as an early warning system, catching drift before it becomes descent. The final aspect of maintaining altitude that Alan emphasizes, and which most people overlook to their detriment, is the importance of understanding that vigilance is not the same as anxiety. Many people, when they first hear about the need for constant awareness of their thoughts and patterns, become anxious that they will never be able to relax, that they are condemning themselves to a life of exhausting self-monitoring, that they are trading the spiral of external failure for a spiral of internal pressure. This is a misunderstanding of what vigilance means in the context of the Will Protocol. Vigilance is not tension, it is awareness. It is not fear, it is attention. It is not the anxious scanning of your mental landscape looking for problems. It is the calm noticing of what is actually there, including the drifting thoughts and the decisive action to redirect when necessary. The difference is analogous to the difference between an anxious driver who grips the steering wheel until his knuckles turn white and overcorrects at every minor deviation, versus a skilled driver who maintains light contact with the wheel, makes smooth corrections when needed, and arrives at his destination without having exhausted himself in the process. As your skill with the protocol develops, vigilance becomes less like work and more like a background operating system, something that runs automatically without consuming your conscious attention, alerting you only when intervention is needed. Alan's conclusion on maintaining altitude is both encouraging and sobering. Encouraging because he asserts that any human being who has successfully pulled out of a dive can maintain the new altitude, that the skills required are learnable and the effort required is sustainable. Sobering because he insists that there are no vacations from consciousness, no periods when you can safely go back to sleep, no point at which you have arrived and can stop paying attention. The spiral wants you back, and gravity is always pulling. And the price of freedom from downward momentum is eternal vigilance, not anxious, exhausting vigilance, but calm, steady, realistic awareness that the old patterns remain encoded in your neurology and can reactivate the moment you stop actively maintaining the new ones. This is not a burden but a responsibility, not a punishment but the cost of being human, not evidence of your weakness but recognition of the reality of how consciousness and habit formation actually work. You are the pilot, the plane is built to fly, but flight requires fuel and attention, and the constant small corrections that keep you on course. Maintain your altitude, execute your micro-renewals, catch your drifting thoughts, and the ascent that began with the first microaction will continue, degree by degree, day by day, until you look back and realize that you have traveled a distance that once seemed impossible from the point where you stood at the bottom of the spiral, with your hand on the master switch and the ocean rushing up to meet you. You pulled up, now you stay up. This is the protocol. This is the practice. This is the price and the reward of mastery over destiny. You are the pilot, and this truth, which has threaded through every element of the Will Protocol, must now be understood not as metaphor, but as mechanical reality, as the fundamental architecture of your relationship to existence itself. The storm that surrounds you, the economy, the circumstances, the past, the pressures, the thousands of forces that seem to determine your fate, does not care whether you crash or whether you climb. The storm has no opinion about you, no investment in your outcome, no preference for your success or your failure. It is simply weather, the neutral environment through which you are flying, and it will continue to churn and buffet and challenge you with complete indifference to whether you survive the passage. Alan's teaching cuts through the comforting lies that most people cling to. The universe is not conspiring to help you, but neither is it conspiring against you. It is simply providing the conditions in which your choices, your thoughts, your exercise of will or failure to exercise it, will produce their inevitable effects according to law. The storm doesn't care, but the plane is built to fly, and you are the one holding the controls, and every thought you think, every decision you make, every moment you choose to pull the master switch or choose to let the spiral continue, determines whether you arrive safely or crash into the depths. The will protocol that we have detailed across these sections is not a guarantee that you will never face difficulty again, not a promise that life will become easy once you have learned to pull out of dives, not a magical solution that removes all problems and obstacles from your path. What it is, with the precision of engineering rather than the vagueness of inspiration, is a systematic method for arresting downward momentum before it becomes irreversible, for reclaiming the energy that the spiral was consuming, for rebuilding the self-efficacy that repeated failures had destroyed, and for establishing new patterns of thought and action that produce ascent rather than descent. The protocol works not because it changes external circumstances, though changed circumstances will be its eventual byproduct, but because it changes the causal patterns you are setting in motion through your consciousness, and the universe must respond to these new causes with new effects, with the same mathematical precision that it responded to your old causes with the old effects that created the spiral in the first place. Alan's insight is that you are always setting causes in motion. The only question is whether you are doing so consciously, with clear intention and sustained will, or unconsciously, through the mechanical repetition of patterns you have never examined and never chosen, but have simply inherited from your conditioning. The synthesis of the protocol's 4 steps creates a complete system for transformation that operates at every level of your being simultaneously. Radical acceptance addresses the informational level, ensuring you have accurate data about your starting point. The silent command addresses the decision level, establishing the new law that will govern your behavior. The microaction addresses the evidence level, providing tangible proof that change is possible and that you are capable of executing it. And maintaining altitude addresses the sustainability level, ensuring that the initial transformation is not just a temporary departure from the spiral, but the beginning of a permanent new trajectory. These 4 elements are not separate techniques, but interconnected components of a single mechanism, the master switch itself, and each one must be executed with precision for the whole system to function. Our car needs all 4 wheels to drive effectively. A plane needs wings, engines, controls, and fuel to fly. Your transformation needs acceptance, command, action, and vigilance to overcome the gravity of accumulated failure and rise toward the life that your true potential makes possible. Alan would want you to understand, in this moment of synthesis, that the power you have discovered through the protocol is not something he gave you or something I have given you through this teaching. It is something you have always possessed, something that was there before you knew its name or understood its use, something that countless human beings live their entire lives without discovering despite carrying it within them every day of their existence. The evolved will is your birthright as a conscious being, the faculty that separates you from the purely mechanical causation of stimulus and response, the force that allows you to stand in the present moment and declare a future that is different from your past. The spiral convinced you that you were powerless, that change was impossible, that you were simply a victim of circumstances you could not control, and every failed attempt at transformation seemed to confirm this lie until you believed it so thoroughly that you stopped trying. The protocol does not create your power. It reveals your power, points you toward the master switch that was always there, and gives you the systematic method for engaging that switch with the precision and force required to actually change your trajectory rather than merely wishing it would change. The measure of whether you have truly understood Alan's teaching is not whether you can explain the protocol intellectually. Anyone who has read this far can do that. But whether you have pulled the switch, whether you have felt the sensation of momentum shifting, whether you have looked at your altimeter and seen the numbers begin to change from descent to level flight to ascent. Theory is useless without application, knowledge is sterile without action, and Alan's work is wasted on anyone who nods in agreement but never executes the protocol when they feel the first rotation of a new spiral beginning. The teaching is complete, the method is revealed, the master switch has been located and explained, and now the only variable is your will. Not in the abstract sense, but in the immediate, practical sense of whether you will do the thing you now know how to do, whether you will pull the switch the next time you feel the nose beginning to dip, whether you will execute radical acceptance and the silent command, and the microaction and the vigilance that maintains what you have begun. Your understanding means nothing if it remains theoretical. The protocol exists to be used, and it is in the using of it that its power is revealed and your destiny is transformed from something that happens to you into something you consciously create through the systematic application of will to the machinery of causation. James Allen, speaking across the decades from his quiet study, where he contemplated the deepest laws of human consciousness and achievement, offers you a decree that should be written on your heart, memorized in your bones, recalled in every moment when you doubt your capacity to break free from the momentum of decline. The human will, that force unseen, the offspring of a deathless soul, can hew a way to any goal, though walls of granite intervene. Read these words slowly. Let them penetrate beneath the surface of casual reading into the deep place where truth either takes root or is rejected, and understand what Allen is actually saying here. He is not offering poetry for its aesthetic value. He is stating a law as precise as the laws of physics, a law that operates whether you believe in it or not, whether you take advantage of it or not, whether you live by it or remain ignorant of it throughout your entire existence. The will is a force, not a feeling, not a wish, not a hope, but an actual force that can be applied to reality with predictable effects. It is unseen, operating in the realm of consciousness, where no microscope can detect it and no instrument can measure it, yet producing effects in the physical world that are undeniable, observable, and repeatable. This force is not distributed unequally by some cosmic lottery. It is the offspring of your deathless soul, which is Allen's way of saying that it comes from the eternal part of you, the part that exists beyond the temporary conditions of your current circumstances, the part that was not created by your past and cannot be destroyed by your present. Every human being possesses this force in equal measure, potentially, but most will die having never developed it, beyond the weakest shadow of what it could have been, having confused it with stubbornness or emotional intensity or desperate hope, never understanding that the true will is something entirely different. It is the focused, conscious, sustained power to shape causation itself, to introduce new causes into the stream of your life that will produce effects aligned with your genuine purpose rather than your conditioned patterns. Allen's message is one of almost shocking empowerment. You can hew a way to any goal, not some goals, not easy goals, not goals that circumstances favor, but any goal that you can conceive clearly and commit to absolutely, even though walls of granite intervene, even though the obstacles seem insurmountable, even though every external indicator suggests that success is impossible. The walls of granite are real. Allen does not minimize the difficulty, does not pretend that transformation is easy or that the obstacles you face are merely illusions. The financial debt, the addictive patterns, the damaged relationships, the wasted years, the accumulated failures, the psychological wounds, the practical limitations, these are not imaginary. They are granite, solid and heavy and resistant to easy solutions. But granite can be hewn, stone can be shaped, even the hardest obstacles can be overcome through the sustained application of force over time, and the force available to you through your evolved will is sufficient to the task, not because Allen says so, but because countless human beings have proven it so, have started from positions of complete devastation and built lives of achievement and purpose and meaning through the systematic application of will to the raw material of their circumstances. The question is never whether you have enough power, you do, but whether you will develop that power through use, whether you will pull the master switch when the spiral begins, whether you will execute the protocol with the precision and persistence required to produce actual transformation, rather than just momentary improvement, followed by relapse. Alan's vision for your life is not comfortable, not easy, not a path of least resistance that promises transformation without effort or discipline or the constant vigilance we have discussed throughout this teaching. His vision is of you as a conscious creator, as the pilot of your own existence, as the sculptor working the granite of circumstance into a form that reflects your true purpose rather than merely responding to pressure and taking the shape that external forces would impose upon you. This vision requires you to accept responsibility, not blame, which is the past-focused acknowledgement of fault, but responsibility, which is the present-focused acceptance of power for the trajectory of your life from this moment forward. You cannot control what has already happened. The past is granite that has already been shaped, and no amount of will can unsculpt it. But you have absolute control over what you do with the present moment, over what thoughts you energize and what thoughts you dismiss, over what actions you take and what actions you refuse to take, over whether you pull the master switch or allow the spiral to continue its rotation toward destruction. The empowerment Alan offers is not the shallow affirmation of positive thinking, not the magical belief that wanting something strongly enough will make it materialize without effort, not the denial of difficulty or the minimization of obstacles. His empowerment is grounded in law, in causation, in the mechanical reality that your thoughts produce emotions, your emotions influence actions, your actions create results, and your results feed back into your thoughts, creating either ascending or descending spirals, depending on whether you are consciously directing this cycle or simply allowing it to run on automatic. The power to intervene in this cycle at any point, to interrupt the pattern, to introduce a new cause that will produce a new effect. This is the power of the evolved will, and this power makes you the master of your destiny, not in the sense that you can control all outcomes, but in the sense that you can determine what causes you set in motion, and the outcomes must follow these causes as effect follows cause in the natural order of things. You cannot make the universe give you what you want through wishing, but you can absolutely create the conditions that make what you want the inevitable result of the causes you are setting in motion. And this is not mysticism, but mechanics, not faith, but physics, not hope, but engineering. Alan's final empowerment is his insistence that the change must begin now, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, not when you feel more ready or more motivated or more capable, but in this exact moment, with whatever resources and capacities you currently possess. The spiral does not pause to let you prepare. It continues its rotation with every passing second, and every second you wait to pull the master switch is another second in which the momentum increases and the recovery becomes more difficult. But equally, every second in which you execute the protocol, every moment in which you exercise radical acceptance and issue the silent command and complete a microaction and maintain vigilance against drifting thoughts, is a second in which new momentum is building in the opposite direction, in which your self-efficacy is being rebuilt, in which the granite is being hewn one chip at a time. The transformation may be gradual, the progress may be measured in degrees rather than dramatic leaps, but it is absolute, irreversible, cumulative. Each day of the protocol practiced builds upon the last, each successful navigation of a moment when the spiral tried to reassert itself strengthens your capacity to navigate the next one. Each small victory makes the next, slightly larger victory possible. You are being given in this moment something that most human beings never receive, a precise map of the territory of transformation, showing you exactly where the master switch is located, exactly how to pull it, exactly what sequence of steps will arrest a downward spiral and initiate an upward climb, and exactly what vigilance is required to maintain that climb over time. Alan has done his work. I have done mine in transmitting his teaching to you in this form, and now the only remaining variable is your decision, not your circumstances, not your past, not your resources, not your education, not the economy, not the people in your life, but your decision. Exercised in the next moment and the moment after that and the moment after that, to be the pilot who flies the plane or the passenger who goes wherever the storm carries him. The master switch is in your hand. The protocol is now known to you. The altimeter is showing your current position with ruthless accuracy, and the ocean or the sky, descent or ascent, crash or climb, the destiny that happens to you or the destiny you create, is being determined by choices you are making right now, whether you realize it or not, whether you take responsibility for them or not, whether you use the knowledge you have gained or allow it to remain merely interesting information that changes nothing about how you actually live. Stop the fall and understand that this command is not a suggestion or a recommendation or a possibility to be considered among other options. It is an emergency imperative, the only rational response to the recognition that you are in descent, that the momentum is building, that each rotation of the spiral consumes more energy and makes recovery harder and brings you closer to the point of irreversible catastrophe. Stop the fall means execute the protocol, not tomorrow or when you feel ready, or after you have thought about it more, but now, beginning with the next thought you think and the next action you take after you finish reading these words. The fall does not pause for your convenience. The spiral does not wait for permission to tighten its grip, and gravity does not care about your excuses or your intentions or your promises to change eventually. Stop the fall means radical acceptance of where you actually are. Silent command declaring where you will no longer go. Microaction proving that the command has teeth, and vigilance ensuring that the drifting thoughts that would pull you back into descent are caught and dismissed before they can rebuild the momentum of decline. This is not one of the things you might do. This is the thing you must do if you want your life to be anything other than the predictable result of patterns you have never examined and momentum you have never interrupted. Start the climb and recognize that the climb is not a single heroic effort, but a direction maintained, a trajectory sustained through the accumulation of small victories that compound over time into transformations that would have seemed impossible from the perspective of where you started. The climb begins with the completion of one microaction, continues with the execution of the next, builds through the daily practice of vigilance, strengthens through each successful renewal of the silent command when drifting thoughts appear, and eventually becomes the new default, the new automatic, the new momentum that carries you upward with increasing ease as the old patterns weaken and the new patterns strengthen. The climb is not dramatic in any single moment, but it is absolute in its cumulative effect, like compound interest turning small deposits into vast wealth, or like erosion wearing through granite through the patient application of water over time. You are not trying to reach the summit tomorrow. You are trying to gain 1 degree of altitude today, and then another tomorrow, and then another the day after that, each one building on the last, each one proving that ascent is possible, each one adding evidence that you are not the powerless victim. The spiral convinced you that you were but rather the conscious creator that Alan always knew you could become. Are you ready to take control? This question is both invitation and challenge, both offer and ultimatum, because the truth is that you already have control. You have always had it. You have never not had it. You have simply been exercising it unconsciously, allowing the master switch to be pulled by circumstances and conditions and patterns rather than by your conscious will. You have been in control of your thoughts, but not conscious of this control, and so the thoughts have run on automatic, generating the same emotions and actions and results they have always generated, creating the spiral through their mechanical repetition. To take control consciously is not to acquire a power you did not possess, but to become aware of a power you have been wielding blindly and to begin directing it with precision toward ends you have consciously chosen rather than ends that have been chosen for you by your conditioning. The question is not whether you can take control. You can because you already have it. But whether you will, whether in this moment and the moments that follow, you will exercise the consciousness, the clarity, the commitment required to pull the master switch when it needs to be pulled and to maintain the vigilance when the old patterns try to reassert themselves. Write in the comments, "I am the pilot," and understand that this is not merely a statement for public consumption, not merely a way to signal agreement with the ideas presented in this teaching, but an act of declaration, a public commitment, a line drawn in your own consciousness and in the witness of others that you are accepting the responsibility and claiming the power that comes with being the pilot of your own existence. When you write these words, you are issuing a version of the silent command, declaring to yourself and to the universe that you recognize your agency, that you accept your responsibility, that you are no longer content to be a passenger carried wherever the wind blows, but have decided to become the conscious navigator of your own course. The act of writing the words, small as it is itself a microaction, the first evidence that you are translating understanding into commitment, knowledge into practice, theory into the beginning of transformation. It costs you nothing but declares everything, takes a single moment but begins a new trajectory, is absurdly simple but marks the point of no return, where you stop being the person who reads about change and become the person who creates it. Let the ascent begin, and recognize that it has already begun the moment you pulled your attention into focus, executed radical acceptance of where you are, issued the silent command establishing where you will no longer go, and completed the first microaction proving that the command is real. The ascent is not something that will happen someday when conditions are right. It is happening now, in this moment, through the thoughts you are thinking and the decisions you are making, and the quality of attention you are bringing to the question of whether you will continue the patterns that have been running or interrupt them with the force of conscious will. The altimeter is moving, imperceptibly at first but undeniably, the numbers beginning to change from descent to level flight to the first degree of climb. The engines are firing, the controls are responding, the nose is coming up, and you are the pilot, your hands are on the controls, your eyes are on the instruments, your will is engaged with the fierce, cold clarity that Alan knew was the only force capable of overriding the gravity of accumulated failure and directing the aircraft of your life toward destinations of your conscious choosing. The storm continues, the wind still buffets, the challenges have not disappeared. But you are flying now rather than falling, climbing rather than crashing, creating rather than reacting, and with each passing moment, the protocol becomes more familiar, the vigilance becomes more automatic, the new patterns become more deeply ingrained, until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer the person who was caught in the spiral, that you have become someone entirely different through the systematic application of will to the raw material of consciousness, and that the life you are living is no longer the one that was happening to you, but the one you consciously created through the mastery of destiny that is every human being's potential and your actual lived reality. The master switch has been pulled. The fall has stopped. The climb has begun. You are the pilot. Let the ascent continue.